This episode is a deep one. It affects every single one of us. The existence and healing of generational trauma. Although it can be somewhat controversial, I have a feeling that since you're listening to this, you already know it's very real and probably know it can be healed, although you don't really know how. Most of us don't. Why would we? Like most of the topics discussed here, however, there is actually science behind these patterns of generational trauma, and I'll touch on that later. Science is always demonstrating more and more of what the ancient mystics already knew. It's more important, though, that we understand how to release it than the science behind it, so we have a lot to cover. And I'm going to run out of time if I don't get at it, so I'm going to jump right in here. So what do you need to do first? We all know we have it. So what do you need to do? Identify the patterns to clear. Obviously, right? If your conscious or subconscious started processing this after the prompt from last week's episode, what patterns in yourself or your family came to your awareness? Because, some patterns, they carry more serious social implications than others. But any behavior impacting your ability to live the life you came here to do is likely needs to be released. It has no purpose for you. Here are just a few things to consider if you're having a little trouble. Most of us don't have that much trouble, but look at your family history. Things like physical or emotional abuse, sexual abuse, suicides. Statistically, once one person in a family chooses the route of suicide, there are more in the same family. Patterns of addiction, abandonment issues, lack of physical or emotional support, inability to show love or say it, excessive relocations, harmful or limiting beliefs around work, love, money, self-worth, personal value, what you deserve and why or why not, health issues and disease. These are just a few of the possibilities of things that could recur throughout family lineages. Understanding what needs to be healed and what can be healed at this time is critical. It can all be healed, but sometimes healing things in a particular order when there's a readiness for that healing can be a factor to the ease of success. Now that you've identified the behavior pattern, you need to get to the bottom of the issue. Remember that just like in other human interactions, sometimes what appears to be the obvious problem may not be what needs to be addressed first. It may be a symptom of an underlying issue. Like when a woman gets angry because you're late for dinner. Is it usually really the reason she's mad? Nope, I guarantee you there's a deeper issue you need to solve, or it'll just keep rearing its ugly head. Like, maybe she's interpreted your actions to mean that you don't value her time or her at all. Or maybe something else, but there's definitely more to the story. Healing ancestral trauma is no different. The goal may be, for example, to heal the pattern of emotional neglect. But to do this, you may need to understand the cause of the original emotional withdrawal that then caused someone to feel neglected. That feeling was an interpretation, not necessarily reality. In this example, it may have started with just one ancestor who crawled into an emotional shell when someone interpreted that in a certain way. That interpretation became a belief and was carried forward into their behavior and to another generation who may have had a different interpretation of that behavior. So the same root event can be expressed in different symptoms and beliefs over time. Maybe one interpretation normalized the behavior, carried it forward as just the way life is, the way love is, the way relationships are. It's the way things are supposed to be. Another one perhaps internalized that parental withdrawal as an indication that they were unworthy of love. Then, in the next generation, perhaps the interpretation was different. Maybe that interpretation was that they were too stupid to be loved. that plays out very differently. So you can see how the same original trauma can look very different, like entirely different traumas throughout the generations, perhaps. Clearly, that original misunderstanding can clear them all, even though they've demonstrated like different traumas. In our example, the original event that played out like emotional withdrawal might have actually been a parent simply trying to be protective. Perhaps there was a worrisome illness or extreme financial hardship, and the parent was just actually either depressed or simply protecting the family by not sharing those hardships. They looked like withdrawal. You may need to be a bit of an investigator, and a pretty darn good one, to get to the truth. Or you can use my simpler method, because I always have a good, easy way. But whatever that ultimate truth, I find it's almost always based on a misunderstanding or a misinterpretation. Often, a child who simply did not yet have the capacity or life experience to really understand the situation. The ancestor who started this really wanted it to be misunderstood? Absolutely not. Do you also think it's possible that their soul has suffered watching this perhaps simple misunderstanding and how it has so dramatically affected their loved ones year after year, decade after decade, maybe even century after century? It's been all the more heartbreaking that there's been nothing they could do from the other side to resolve it. How would you feel if you looked back and found that something you did that was actually meant to protect your family was misunderstood in a way that caused them great harm, not only to your children, but that continued to your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, with no end in sight? Chances are they have been desperately waiting for the opportunity to make it right. You are that opportunity they have been waiting for. And you will not need to convince the right ancestor to help you, believe me. Not only that, we often reincarnate in the same soul group, meaning that a mother may return as a grandson or a father as a great-nephew, etc. You could be the ancestor you've been waiting for. It might have been you. You have awakened to the point of finally being able to resolve this, and you've found the help and support to accomplish it. So don't turn your back on your family group. They're counting on you. Whether you're listening to this when it was first published, or maybe it's years later now, all is aligned. The time is now. You're not alone. You not only have your ancestors and perhaps your Akashic self all right here to help you. You have added energy because I've added energy to this video that remains, no matter when you watch it, to assist in the process. Time is just a construct, right? Okay, back to the process. If you're working through recent traumas or things you already know how to divine the answer to, great. If not, before you start feeling overwhelmed, don't worry. I'm going to cut through it all and make it easy, so stick with me. I didn't say it'd be easy. After all, if it were easy, someone would have done it long ago, right? Many things need to happen to be successful. It takes desire, insight, skill, compassion to be successful, and most importantly, you need the right tools. But the healing results are well worth the effort. What would you do to save your children and grandchildren from this kind of trauma? The things you've gone through in your life. Anything, right? Anything. You can do this with a bit of guidance and a valuable tool, which you'll get here, and some help from your ancestors, who, by the way, usually want this healed even more than you do. They've been waiting with great anticipation for someone to come along who could do this. Yep, it's you. I'm going to make this extremely easy. Believe me. The first thing I'm going to do is to make it easy for you to cut to the chase and tell you how to easily find the thing that needs your attention first. Make the following statements to yourself and notice your internal reaction. I'm not important. I'm not good enough. People are not interested in what I have to say. I'm stupid. I'm a monkey. Okay, now you were supposed to repeat them, so repeat each one. Doesn't have to be out loud. Well, your internal spidey sense reacted differently to each one of these statements, didn't it? Questions like these can help you determine which beliefs are impacting you. Similar statements can be made about money, love, family, and you'll quickly find out where your limiting beliefs lie and what beliefs you have that are just wrong, that don't make any sense to the logical mind, but your subconscious is identifying with them. Your limiting beliefs need to be cleared, whether they originated with you or your ancestors. And I'll almost guarantee they didn't originate with you. 95% of our beliefs about ourselves, others, and the world around us don't originate with us. Okay, you have the what. And feel free to start with something a whole lot lighter than sexual abuse. Okay, let's build some skills here first. All right, next, you need the when. When did it start? If you know, great. But honestly, you probably don't, even if you think you do. You can spend years in therapy, or a faster approach would be a current or past life regression using hypnosis, meditation, any of the various forms out there. You can do this with other methods too, including plain old intuition. But intuitive hits are often fleeting and easily misconstrued as wishful thinking. But there is an almost instant way to know. There's a useful tool that actually moves in a tangible way, giving you more confidence while you're developing that greater level of intuition. If you know me at all, then you know what I'm referring to. And everyone said, yep, grab your pendulum and the charts that I've created and linked to this post that are on the website waiting for you. If you don't dowse, it is past time you learned, and you'll find things on that website to help you with that as well. Seriously, with your trusty pendulum, figuring out when all this started, or anything else for that matter, is easy. Let's get to the doing of it. Many of you already know how to do this, so I won't take the time to demonstrate it live here, but if you want access to an upcoming video of me actually demonstrating how to use the chart and get these answers, sign up on the website, links below, and you will be notified when it's ready. You know the what, you know the when. Oh, wait, are you still stuck on the what? Well, guess what? I have a chart for the what too, so go get it. And let's get this done. No more excuses. It's time to heal. All right, call in the ancestors. One or more, call them in. Connection with the appropriate ancestor is critical. That's the one or more who has the information you need to accomplish the task at hand. And the one who has done the work to know what to do to heal and who's willing to help. Your focused intent is to call in, ideally, the one where the trauma started, but it's not necessary. It's far more important to partner with an ancestor who's done the work to grow and heal, either on the earth plane or on the other side. Because leaving this earthly life does not give one immediate access to all wisdom and knowledge, nor does it change a person's personality to be automatically loving and supportive. Many ancestors are angry, bored, spiteful, or just plain old mischievous, kind of like they were in real life. Well, it's all real life, but on earthly life, many who return from NDEs, that's near-death experiences, report that rather than a judgment day, as many religions would try to frighten people with, the transition process includes more of a life review. And each soul can experience every one of the actions of their lifetime as the other person to really get the full understanding of the impact of their actions on the other person and from the other person's perspective. Now, this is just one of the opportunities to grow and develop compassion and heal when we're not in the physical plane, to regain some of that source wisdom, but not all take it. There is still free choice. They don't have to learn and grow from those opportunities. Many are simply just not ready to understand how their actions impacted others. If they do, though, they can make a giant leap in compassion, bringing them to a whole different place in their next life rather than repeating so many of the painful things from the past ones. Not only must this ancestor have done the work and have the wisdom to help, they must also have a willingness to help. Knowing how and wanting to assist does not give them the ability to actually perform the healing, though. Can't be done from the other side. They can't mess with free will of the living. So it requires a choice to be made by a living entity. Yep, that's you. All right, so before we proceed to the actual clearing process, your intention is to clear the root cause or the root misinterpretation. Not necessarily just the subsequent behaviors or the variety of beliefs that may have been created in the minds of the various descendants. Only by doing this, going back to the original, can you clear all the mutated limiting beliefs and understandings that occurred over time. Because remember, each descendant could have had a slightly different interpretation of that behavior. Developing a bit of compassion around this situation is the fastest and most powerful way to really heal it. So let's take another minute on this. It's super important, so not that you were tempted to, but don't skip ahead here. The vast majority were misunderstandings, but in some cases, that first trauma event was not a misunderstanding, but an act of abuse. As a result of trauma the perpetrator experienced themselves and carried on, but occurred either as a part of a soul contract where they had a loving agreement with your soul to be the bad guy in order to provide the desired opportunity to overcome the experience, or a karmic interaction. Yes, sometimes your soul does ask for this situation, or is granted the experience as an opportunity to use and develop skills in healing or awareness. Sometimes it works, in which case, we wouldn't be here talking about it. At other times, it doesn't. It leaves wounds that carry forward for others to heal. Sometimes these can be healed by understanding that the original purpose was a plan. And perhaps you offered a similar reciprocal service as the bad guy to them in another lifetime. The deeper understanding then can result in compassion or forgiveness, or more than forgiveness, since it was a plan, an appreciation of the gift that it was intended to be, even if it did not fully play out as planned for whatever reason. The playing out of a soul contract or our karmic condition was not nearly as likely, though, as a simple misinterpretation. A misinterpretation which created an inaccurate belief about themselves, another, or the world around them. That misinterpretation, by the first descendant was likely made by a small child who grew up with that understanding and passed it on. Chances are they naturally thought as a child does, asking what small children always do. Why? Why does Daddy not spend time with me? Why is Mommy so sad? Why am I always hungry? Why does everyone yell at me? Why do they leave me with a stranger instead of taking me too? Why is there not enough money to buy toys or maybe food? Why? 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 A child's answers to these questions would likely be very me-centered and also very different from an adult who has a more developed brain and understanding of the world. A child might be because I'm not worthy, not loved, not smart, or that life is hard, or money is scarce or hard to get. Even as adults, we often misinterpret the actions of others. What do we do when our spouse walks in the front door and doesn't acknowledge us, perhaps? Especially if the behavior repeats several days in a row. What's often the first thought or interpretation of that action? They're mad at me, or they don't love me anymore, or worse. Yet what did we really know to be true from that action? Nothing, really. If you can think of even one good reason they may have done that, perhaps they had a hard day, or maybe they really needed to get to the bathroom, then you were not first thing on their mind. Any reason at all that you can think of that you weren't on their mind at that moment to address you in the way you expected, then you can easily recognize that the action itself had no meaning of its own, only the meaning you gave it in your mind. That meaning was only created in our mind. And the interpretation we decided on most likely has no basis at all in reality. It's said that 95% of our memories are not correct. If the misunderstanding is held on to, though, it perpetuates into a wrong belief about something, and that can get passed on. There have certainly been a lot of things to have misunderstandings about over the centuries in family life alone, not to mention entire cultures. Entire segments of the population who have been impacted by mass social actions and government actions, been caused to flee from their homeland, flee from everything that they know and love and start over in a strange land where perhaps their deepest identities were attacked or even stolen in the process. These leave deep wounds, and those scars exist to this day, to varying degrees, in all of us. No wonder so many of us have limiting belief systems and unhealed trauma. Today, we're taking on familial ancestral trauma. And while clearing this will make a huge difference in your life and the lives of both your descending and ascending genealogy, this is just the tip of the ancestral iceberg. Using your power to change the energy around cultural trauma can have an even bigger healing impact, not only for you personally, but for humanity as a whole. But that's for another episode. Oh, wait, back up, I heard many of you say. I know I'm affecting my descendants with my healing and what I'm about to do, but you said ascending genealogy too. What? Yes, I did. Let's talk briefly about the concept of time. A wise man, when asked, "What is time?" thought for a moment, then answered, "It isn't." Because it simply isn't. It isn't what you may think. Time doesn't move like an arrow in only two directions, forward and back, past and future. Science has joined the mystics. Both agree that time is merely a construct of our mass consciousness, simply created because it's useful to us. There have even been intention experiments showing that intention or spell set in motion today can and does impact things that actually occurred in what we call the past. Many say time is more like a circle, with everything happening all at once. I find it useful to think of it more like a pond, where each earthly experience is like a drop of water that splashes up from the surface of the pond as a result of some energetic action, like when a pebble gets dropped in. Then that droplet falls back, returning to the pond. The memory of everything it experienced while separated from the wholeness of the pond has an energetic vibration that can be distinguished as a particular color or vibratory rate when there's a need to do so or a benefit in doing so, but mostly it's like when you add more salt to the soup. Where's the salt? What did that added salt bring to the soup? It's in there with everything else. It affects the potatoes and the carrots and everything else too that was added either before or after the salt. So to make a change to the pot or pond of the soul can shift any aspect of it, with no such thing as past or future. It's also believed by many that your lifetimes are non-sequential. No past, no future. So no past lifetimes, no future lifetimes, just lifetimes. And they occur in whatever environment is most likely to create the conditions you want to experience. The general rule has been that each lifetime begins with what we need to know to accomplish that lifetime's objective. But many of us have drawn from knowledge of other lifetimes on occasion as the need arose during this lifetime, and I believe that given the energetic changes of the recent years on the planet, we will be able to consciously choose what to bring in the next time. We won't start with a clean slate, so to speak. Even if we want to continue expanding from our current level of knowledge, rather than learning it all over again, let's start with the ability to talk and walk. Why do we have to learn that all over again every single time? It's not useful necessarily to the process. I think next time we can come in knowing those things almost immediately, if we choose. But that's for another episode. It's getting late, so let's get this finished. If you're not comfortable with pendulum dowsing, you can certainly use a more standard spellcasting method. But for me, unless there's a distinct benefit or advantage to the drawn-out ceremony or ritualistic method, and sometimes there is, I like the fast and efficient. I just want the results. With your what, if you know it, and your when clearly in your mind, you've called in the appropriate ancestors to help, and yes, there's a chart for that too. Run along now, go get it. I generally start by asking, to what degree is my lineage being impacted by the issue? Look on a scale from 0 to 10. You need a baseline, or at least it's helpful to have one. So that number will likely to be over 7. But if it's less than 3, then ask if there's something more impactful you need to address first. Once you have arrived at the most impactful issue that you need to be clearing right now, you're holding up your pendulum and allowing it to swing in a circular motion, with the intention that you and your ancestors are clearing the original and all the related misunderstandings from all those affected, replacing that with the wisdom and the ability to interpret those actions and behaviors in a different, more beneficial way. Allow the pendulum to continue circling until all the misunderstandings have been cleared. Now, this could take several seconds or several minutes. Sometimes it feels like these things go on forever. But when it stops, ask, to what degree is my lineage now being impacted by this issue on a scale of 0 to 10? That reading should be 0, or at least considerably less. If the number is not 0, ask if more can be cleared at this time. If yes, perform the clearing again in the same way and retest the new level, repeating until 0 is reached. If no is your pendulum's answer, use the time chart and determine when you'll be able to clear more or the rest. And if you can put additional clearing into the ethers, into the universe, to be implemented automatically when the time is right. Let's do this the easy way, if it's possible. If this is the case, recheck periodically and assure that your clearing has been implemented by the universe, or ask more questions, or if there's anything else that you can do to speed up the process. By the way, if you don't have a time chart, yes, you can get one, website, hello, or you can simply ask yes or no questions like, Should I clear again in less than a week, more than a week, more than a month? Narrow it down as best you can with yes or no questions. Whether you use the traditional spellcasting method or this simplified pendulum clearing method, when you're finished, take a few moments to really appreciate the power of the results. You made a difference. Celebrate with your ancestors and all those to come as well. See the hundreds, even thousands of ancestors and descendants all rejoicing because they will not have to deal with this emotional baggage. You've cleared it. They won't have to deal with it now, and they won't have to deal with it then when they return in a subsequent lifetime further down the lineage. Clearing ancestral trauma is too important. So if you're not comfortable using a pendulum for this purpose, write a traditional spell. Those can be fun too, and obviously very effective. If you need more guidance with this, reach out to me via the website for help. I'm here. I want you to solve this. The solution to our future happens with us. Make this time of Samhain, when the veil is thin, a time for honoring the ancestors like never before. And you are your own ancestor. So until next week, live using and believing in the power of magic.